We'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on tackling 5 taboo topics in cybersecurity people management. So today we're very privileged to have with us Mr. Dave Buster and Mr. Ross Casanova to discuss these 5 taboo questions. Dave is the Global Senior Portfolio Director for Cybersecurity at Global Knowledge. He has over 35 years of experience as a technologist in engineering roles. He holds an MBA, bachelor's degree in engineering, and also a Security Plus and CISSP certification. And Ross as well, 35 plus years of experience in both cybersecurity engineering roles and also in instructional design and training program management. And he's held those roles with firms such as SANS, the SEC, and CSRA. So it's my pleasure to pass the floor over to Dave and Ross to address that first taboo question that many managers and employees may have asked themselves. Do cybersecurity certifications create flight risk? So take it away, Dave and Ross.
Well, thank you. This is Dave, and I appreciate you setting all this up for us. This is going to be an interesting conversation we have here today. And this first question is really an interesting question to a lot of us that study cybersecurity and are interested in cybersecurity certifications. As it turns out, we do know that when people get a certification, they don't do it just because it's fun. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot to it. And the reason you do that is career advancement. Now, the problem occurs whenever you go through all the months of study, sometimes evenings and nights studying and working through this stuff, and then taking classes, training courses on these things, and then eventually taking some sort of test and passing that. And then you go back to work the next Monday morning and nothing has changed. You're just, it's the same old. You're doing the same job. You may not even be in cybersecurity, and you want to be. So what do you do as a user or as a student? You have this brand new shiny certification and nobody seems to acknowledge it in your office. So that's kind of the fundamental problem, and that's why it creates a problem for managers if they're not able to offer an opportunity for employees after they get a certification. Those employees are quite likely to start looking around, and that's kind of the situation. So Ross, what do you think about it?
Well, I would agree that in some situations it could become a flight risk, and for the points that you had mentioned in there, as well as not being able to implement that cybersecurity certification as you're going through there. Now, I would say that if the company is actually paying for the training and the certification, they expect to get something out of it as well. So if that certification program is not properly vetted first, in other words, that there's some kind of a string attached to it in that sense for that certification, if the company is paying for that certification and that training and they expect to put you in that position in one way or the other, and now that you have the certification, you decide that you're going to start looking elsewhere in order to try to get a position that's got more responsibilities and those things, well, that becomes a problem. And that's why I would say, if it's not properly vetted, there should be some kind of a string in there, in the sense that if the company is paying for the training and the certification, that there's going to be a return on investment in there. So maybe a couple months of work from you in with that particular certification or something like that. Unlike what they do, like in the military and in those things, that if you join the military and they're going to be paying for your college, that you owe them 3 years, right? Well, maybe not to that extreme with a certification, but possibly maybe with some kind of a threshold there as well. And if you decide to leave during that time period, that maybe there's a repayment process in there. Reimburse the company for the cost that they implemented or that they shelled out for the certification and the training ahead of time, if you're going to use that certification in order to move on to a different position.
Okay, interesting. So the next question and that comes to mind, how should organizations reward staff who achieve certification?
Well, this is Dave again. That's a good point. What Ross just described is a pretty typical situation in industry where if you leave early, you have to pay back some prorated amount of the cost of the certification if the company paid for it. But there's a carrot and stick opportunity here. It could be that it would be more effective to reward someone who gets a certification and stays than to penalize them if they leave. So in that situation, I think what some organizations try to do is number one, the simplest thing is just simple recognition. I mean, send out an email to the whole department saying, you know, Joe got this new certification. We're very proud of him. Thank you very much for your dedication, Joe. That goes a long way. I mean, people underestimate how powerful messaging can be from management. And secondly, some organizations will send out a Starbucks gift card or some kind of little token of recognition for somebody who achieves this kind of status. I have worked for organizations that did something as large as a $500 bonus for getting a certification, and I think that's a great idea. You know, at the end of the year, it doesn't really impact the overall budget all that much, but it does have a significant impact and it tells the employees that the employer values the certification and they appreciate the effort that the employee put in to get it. I think more rare, but what I'd like to see more of is a slight bump in pay for getting a certification. Employers are reluctant to do that because anytime you're talking about salary, there's all kinds of unintended consequences and parity and all these other things that come into play. But they do, it does make sense in some cases to offer, you know, a 1 or 2% raise for somebody that gets a certification. I have, in my own career, I've gotten raises because I held a security clearance or something like that for a period of time. And it certainly makes sense, but again, it depends on the organization itself.
I would agree with that, Dave. This is Ross, because again, making sure that the company can leverage the benefit that they're going to get from that employee actually getting the certification, especially in areas where there a certification that's in high demand for that particular organization. If they have a shortage of CISSPs, for example, and they need to get some CISSPs in there, then maybe offer that incentive that if you get your CISSP, you know, that you might get a 1 or 2% bonus, bump and raise for that time period, or a one-time bonus or something like that, in the sense that what it would equate to, right, as an incentive for working hard and getting that certification, because obviously the company is then going to be able to leverage that certification by putting that person with the CISSP on a contract and be able to use that person on that contract, right? Or maybe bid them on a contract that they're getting ready to use. So they're going to get some benefit from there. And I've seen that as well, where the training organization actually tracks who receives certifications like PMP certifications, CISSPs, Security Plus, and they actually announce that maybe in the weekly newsletter that they have for the company of the following people that receive certifications, and to give them that acknowledgement. And I agree that that does go a long way as well.
Okay, excellent. So that brings us to that next part of that question then. Why would someone leave after having achieved certification? What are some of the factors that could push them to start looking elsewhere?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. In my own experience, when I've gotten certifications in the past, I have not gone out the next day looking for a job. But what I did do was drop something on LinkedIn saying I've got this Security Plus or whatever. I get a Security Plus, and all my friends start congratulating him on LinkedIn, and that feels pretty good. And then when I got my CISSP, I suddenly had my LinkedIn account light up like a Christmas tree with all these headhunters wanting to lure me away with promises of ping pong tables in the break room and all kinds of other things that have nothing to do with cybersecurity. But so what happens is there's a kind of a grass is greener on the other side kind of situation that occurs where things do start looking better, your horizons open up, and you start to see other opportunities in the field that you didn't know were there before you had the certification. And so it is tempting to at least have some of those conversations and ultimately get lured away.
I would agree with that. I think that if anybody, after they get their certification, they are inclined to leave, it would probably be mainly because of compensation. They want to make sure that they're going to be paid based on the value that they're going to be providing because of the result of getting that certification in that sense. So they have a sense of more value, and if the company is not, the company that they're currently with isn't providing them the incentive in order to be able to capitalize on that new certification, that's maybe where they start straying and looking for another position somewhere else. But again, it's a matter of how they obtain that certification and what type of certification it is. There's a lot of certifications out there like certified ethical hacking and CISSP and some of those that are more difficult to get, that once you put it on your LinkedIn account, yeah, it's going to light up like a Christmas tree, because there's a lot of contracts out there that require those certifications, especially if you have a clearance in conjunction with that, right? So then it just makes you more marketable, and the fact that you're made more marketable, then you kind of start wondering, well, is this the best place for me, or should I go somewhere else?
Yeah, so just to amplify on that just a little bit, Ross, I noticed whenever an employee changes companies, it's routine in industry, especially in the cybersecurity world, that if you change companies, you can expect a 5 or 10% raise at a minimum to just change companies. And your old company probably can't give you a 10% raise to try to keep you. And the problem is, even if they did give you a 10% raise to keep you, you're no longer considered a loyal employee. You're still, you've shown a tendency to wander at that point, and so some companies have a policy that they don't want to bid against external companies. They'll just let you go. So it creates a problem. The things that keep you at a company are typically not just salary related, but when you leave a company, it's almost always salary related, as Ross said.
Mm.
Yep. And the other thing is also the fact of not bidding or not competing to keep you at that company is the fact that you may actually overprice yourself or out, your compensation may actually outgrow the positions that they have slotted for you within that company. So basically, at that point, you're no longer competitive with the industry in that area as well.
Okay, good, thank you. So last aspect of that question then, if I am a manager and I'm going to invest in certification for my staff, but then, as you mentioned, they might be getting offers from companies with ping pong tables and better shiny things to offer, why should I invest in that certification if it's going to create a flight risk?
That's a good question. And I have actually had this conversation with some managers in the industry who express reservations. And so what some companies do is they just sort of downplay certifications internally. They don't talk about them. Other companies who require certifications to meet certain contractual requirements and things have to go there, and they have to talk about them, and they have to do it. But a lot of companies I've seen just simply don't discuss certifications. If an employee wants to do it, they'll pay for it, and they have a program for employee education, and that's it, but they don't encourage it. I think maybe that's a mistake. I think it would be better and healthier for the industry if all managers accept the fact that yes, there is some risk that an employee will leave, but it's still the right thing to do, to go ahead and fund a cybersecurity certification, because somewhere out there there's another manager having the same problem that's paying for certification for an employee that you're going to hire in the future. So I think a rising tide lifts all the boats. So I think everybody should get certified. So I think the right thing to do is, go ahead and make it possible for employees to get certified, fund it, and build the industry.
I would agree with that, Dave. And I would say that, you have to look at it in the sense that the benefit, probably outweighs the risk, especially if it's tied to a retention or something like that, or some kind of a program in there that either way, the company will get reimbursed for if they leave early. So that's going to be a win-win in that situation. And the fact that if they do get that certification, they can be leveraged into more projects and those kinds of things, which would then equate to more revenue for the company as well, and also for growth as far as experience for that particular employee because of the fact that they have the certification.
Okay, thank you. We do have one question that's come in, and so I encourage everyone, in particular this question, on Do cybersecurity certifications create flight risk? If you have a question, put that into the question box. This one individual is asking, and in particular, if a staff member's invested a lot themselves, maybe they've even paid themselves to get certified, and then they feel there's no recognition coming their way, they're not able to use what they've learned. What are some indicators that maybe that person should start looking elsewhere? What are some signs that might be coming their way that, you know what, my services are better used elsewhere?
That's a really good point. Very often it's the right thing to do to leave a situation and go find something better. You have to remember that 50% of the companies out there are in the bottom half of the industry, and you might be working for one of them. And it might be that there's a better situation out there, but my only advice would be to definitely look before you leap. It's not just about the certification, but it's about career growth potential and satisfaction with the job and other things as well.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Yeah, I think we'll have to move on to our next question. And so I'm just going to sum that up, what you gentlemen have discussed. In conclusion then, not offering certifications can present an even greater flight risk than offering them. I guess you'd agree that sums that up.
I would agree.
Good.
Yes.
So our next question then, do penetration testing and ethical hacking courses teach the bad guys?
This has been an interesting question, and I've gone to a lot of hacker type conventions and things like that, and I've met people at some of these conventions that I'm convinced were not good guys. I'm not going to say they were bad guys, but they were definitely not necessarily good guys. And I've also watched a lot of YouTube videos and things like that on hacking techniques and things that were clearly put on by somebody who had no sense of ethics or propriety at all. And so it concerns me, and as Global Knowledge, as we sell our courses and deliver training to students on how to hack into systems, I have a personal concern that some of the students in our classes might be bad guys. And so this is a question that I'm kind of doing a little soul searching myself on as to whether we're enabling the enemy, so to speak.
I would agree with that point, but that could be applied to any training course, right? I mean, any training course could be used for malicious purposes. So should we then stop training altogether, in these specialized areas on certified ethical hacking and maybe risk management and those kinds of things? Because if we identify these areas as vulnerabilities, then maybe somebody can capitalize on that in that sense. And I would probably argue and say no, that's not probably the way to go. The fact that we're actually training these individuals at that point, we really don't have any control over if someone's going to be malicious or not. But it's going to be kind of difficult to parse them out of the class, right? Because somebody that starts out as a good intentioned type of person, and something happens along the way, and then they capitalize on it. Well, I know how to do this because they taught me how to do this, so now I'm going to turn the tables on them. Well, there's really no control at that point.
Okay, so why then should we teach people to hack systems, such as courses that Global Knowledge offers? How does that benefit an organization for their staff to learn these skills?
Well, I think from our standpoint, and I've talked with people at EC Council who do the Certified Ethical Hacker certification and things like that. The prevailing wisdom in the industry is that the best way to defend a system is to know how someone's going to attack it. It's one thing to say, please go configure that firewall, and block some ports. It's another thing to know why you're doing that and why those ports would be valuable to an attacker and how they would use those ports. The other thing is it makes people much smarter about defending an organization so that they can develop some nuance in the way they structure their defenses. They can spend the money more effectively, more wisely. They can understand what types of attackers are likely to come in and what tools they're likely to use and that sort of thing. So the prevailing wisdom is that if you teach people to hack, they can defend. My concern is that sometimes people just get stuck on hacking and don't think about turning that around into a defense. So there's a lot of emphasis on breaking things and less emphasis on fixing them sometimes in the industry.
And I would agree with that, Dave. This is a classic example of offense is going to enforce that defense, right? If you know what it is or if you know the methodology used in order to hack a system, then you can turn around and come up with countermeasures in order to be able to prevent or reinforce or harden the systems so that those vulnerabilities are not there. And in that sense, there, it's a matter of making sure that they follow through on that process, right? If you're doing the training, to make sure that you have a follow through on there, as the purpose of this is to actually harden our systems, just like any other penetration testing and those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you. So what's the difference then between white hat, black hat, and gray hat hackers? Or for our UK listeners, GREY hat hackers. How can you explain the
That's right.
difference there?
Yeah, we got to watch the spelling.
Yeah.
This comes back from the old Western movies where the good guys always wore white hats, and so we think of white hats as the penetration testers that are trying to do things to strengthen the organization, typically referred to as red teams as attackers on an organization, and they attack a system and then write a report about the vulnerabilities they found and that sort of thing. Black hats are the bad guys. These are people who are attacking either for fun or attacking for money or power or whatever they're trying to do. But they tend to be skirting outside the law. They don't ask permission. They do whatever they want to do. Note that you're a black hat if you attack a system without permission, even if you intend no harm. That makes you a black hat. I think gray hats are those people that fall somewhere in the middle, where on some days they are acting as a white hat and writing a report, and then when they go home at night, they just attack for fun. And I think there are some people in the industry kind of like that. In fact, I think that's what the prevalence is at some of the conferences.
And I would agree in that sense there, that the white hat is usually looked upon as a security expert that's basically testing a system or doing other security testing methods, and the black hat in that sense is the hacker that's actually going to try to bypass a security system. Now with the black hats, you also have those crackers, right? The crackers are the ones that actually go in there, and their whole purpose is just to break the system in that sense. So those are the bad guys in there. And the gray hat, it could be a hacker or a security expert, just like Dave said, and that sometimes maybe turns around and violates the law, or in sense doesn't adhere to the ethical standards that they're supposed to for hacking and those kinds of things. So they may have maybe no malicious intent in that sense, but they're not following through on that particular ethics that we have.
Okay, thank you. So if you mentioned then again that these typical black hat hackers, they're not the type of folks to be attending and investing in professional training such that Global Knowledge offers. Where are they learning their methods then?
It's funny when you talk to people about this. Most people got into it because in high school they liked playing with computers, and they tripped over at some point in their life. They tripped over a situation where they saw, source code for a web page, and saw, some information in there that they could use, or something else that triggered an interest in hacking. But typically what they do is just read a few books and watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and then just play with things and try to break things. That results in someone with a kind of an unstructured knowledge of how things work. So there's probably large gaps in their education here and there that they're not even aware of. You don't necessarily have to know how to write code in order to hack, but there are other things that they're not aware of that they need to know, but they don't. They learn just enough to get the immediate hack done and then move on to the next thing. It's interesting that when we train the white hat hackers, we go through a pretty formal process, and the reason for that is we have to cover the entire waterfront, all possible ways of attack. Whereas most black hat hackers just have one or two favorite ways, and if they can't get in that way, they'll move on.
And I would agree with that. It's probably a matter of if they found a script that they like to use, or what their intent is, for web page defacement, or whatever they're into that one time period. They may turn around and just grab a script and modify a script and use that in order to attack a system or a web page. So there may be a lack of education in those areas in there, especially if they're just novice, that somebody from a that's just starting out on this, but says, hey, this might be fun to try to do. Let me see what I can get away with.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. One thing I've heard of is companies offering a bug bounty. Can you explain a little bit more what that is?
Yeah, this is an interesting development in the industry, which I actually encourage. I think it's a great idea. The sense is that a company, rather than test their own systems and look for vulnerabilities, a company acknowledges that they're not, super experts. They need help, and the easiest way to find vulnerabilities and bugs is to crowdsource it. Essentially, ask the wisdom of the crowds to come in and attack their system. So a company will set up a process where if anybody in the public can find a way to hack into a system, they notify that company, write up a little report, and the company pays them a reward based on the severity of the crack that they found. It's pretty lucrative for some people. Some people actually make some good money doing these things. Other people play with it and give up, but in the long run, it's actually cost effective for the companies to do it this way.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. That basically paying someone to find a bug and then report on it is one of the aspects there. Even if they have had a rigorous testing program before they actually launch that piece of software and those things, there's always something that's gonna fall through the cracks, right? And that's kind of like Linus's law in there, that if you get enough eyeballs looking at something, then eventually all the bugs are going to be found in there. And as long as they have a program in there to capitalize on the fact that if I find this, I'm going to get some compensation if I report it, then that brings that up into play. Because if there isn't anything in there, and it's just a matter of if I find this and I tell them about it and they don't do anything as far as compensations or even do anything about it, they kind of sweep it under the rug, then that becomes one of those things. Well, and then I'll broadcast this vulnerability and let everybody else turn around and try to hack them, right? So that's not where they want to go. So that's where this bug bounty kind of comes in there. If you find it, you let us know about it, then we'll turn around and correct the situation.
Okay, excellent explanation. Thank you, fellas. So that brings that question to an end. And as a takeaway, we could say that penetration testing is only useful, and in fact can be very useful when it's used to strengthen systems. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think I have one question that's just come in here. Yeah, I think that one will probably be addressed a little later on there. So we'll, oh yeah, so the gentleman's asking here, I'm more focused on information security management. I want to embody just the management aspect of information security. So I guess as opposed to the hands-on skills. So what skills, topics, and qualities are necessary to be that consummate information security professional?
There are different career paths that you can go through in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is becoming a large enough topic that is now developing subspecialties. And one of the things you can do, you can be a penetration tester, but that's only one of about 8 different categories that we've identified in Global Knowledge. Other ones include architecture and policy and governance and risk and all these other things. A lot of those are not hands-on at all. They're not touching hardware. They're simply looking at that. And then when you move up into the higher levels of an organization, you can go into auditing and architecture and actually into management. So if you were going to go into auditing or architecture or something, I would look at a CISA or a CISM type certification. If you're going to go into just become a certified information security officer, you could do a CISSP or something like that. But there are definitely career tracks for people who don't want or need to touch equipment every day, and that's probably becoming more and more prevalent. So that's a good way to go.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I hope that answered your question, Craig. Time is ticking there, so we're going to have to move on to question number 3, and that is, Can an organization's cybersecurity policy be a competitive differentiator? So for example, is that something we want to market to the masses, how secure we are?
Well, you've got about a 50% chance of earning it. Remember, it's an average. So half the people earn more and half the people earn less. And there's a lot of other factors that can affect the salary certification, salary. And these include things like the industry that you're in, the tasks that you're actually doing, what your role is. It includes the regional area that you're in and cost of living and that sort of thing. There's a lot of different things that go into it.
I would agree with that, and I would probably say, to set the expectations that no, just because the factors are out there that say that you're supposed to be getting this much. In that sense, you may not actually be able to get that because, like Dave said, the region that you're in, a CISSP in Washington D.C. area is probably going to be making, even if you're looking at two individuals that are equally qualified, will probably be making more than a CISSP in Florida, for example, because the pay scales out there in those areas are probably less. And the other contributing factor there is also going to be experience. How experienced are you in that area, in that field, in order to put that certification to work in there? So it's not just the certification itself, but also the experience that you bring behind it.
Okay, thank you. You touched on a few there. Any other factors that can affect someone's salary besides just a certification?
Well, I think we've covered them pretty well. I mean, the main thing is a salary is a personal contract between you and your employer, and nobody else is part of that conversation. So there's all kinds of things, and you may be willing to accept a lower salary for a better work environment or the ability to work at home 2 days a week, whatever it is. I mean, there's things outside of salary that give you value in the job.
And I would agree with that. I mean, in some areas, actually taking a cut in pay is a better situation for that employee because of the benefits that they have as a not the non-tangible types of benefits that the company offers versus just the pay in that sense.
Okay, thank you. So how could you then quantify or qualify the value of a certification?
I think that certifications need to be thought of more in terms of a kind of a holistic view. It's not just the dollar figure that it would bring in. If that was the case, everybody would just become a CPA or something like that, and then we'd have too many of those. The point of a certification is to demonstrate knowledge and ability and some skills, and sometimes there's value in just having that new knowledge. I mean, just the body of knowledge that you're generally required to study in order to get a certification is good. Most people have certain gaps in their education, just like we were talking with black hat hackers and things earlier, but having a certification proves that you've been through at least a pretty nominal level at all different portions of the body of knowledge, and you understand at least a pretty good idea of what goes on all over it. So it's not just the dollar figure, it's making you a more well-rounded employee and probably a more flexible person as well.
I would agree with that, Dave. And in some cases, just to elaborate on that, it could actually be the rubber stamp that you need in order to show that you actually have the experience in that particular field as well. You may have been working in that field for a couple of years, and the certification that you obtain after you've been working in that field may just provide that additional certification or that rubber stamp in there that says that, yeah, I've got the experience, I've been working in this field, and I also have a certification to prove that I understand the body of knowledge that this actually entails.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and I think it can also demonstrate really a person's initiative and their commitment too, given that these certifications aren't always that easy to obtain. So good point. So yeah, well responded to. So from what Dave and Ross, what you've explained, then we can really say that the takeaway to this question, can a cybersecurity certification increase my earning potential? Well, it can't guarantee a better paying job, but the lack of one certainly can keep you from getting one. So I think that was very well explained. Thank you for that. So let's move on to number 5, and that is, should your organization hack back? What would you say about that?
So that has come under increased scrutiny over the last few years. I think it started with Clifford Stoll years ago, and he wrote his book about tracking a hacker through his network and things like that. And the real question is, should an organization do anything offensive back toward the hacker?
And I think that this is what we're talking about is digital revenge in that sense there. So, you kind of have to look at it and says, okay, well, if we're doing this, is it going to be an ethical violation of that certification that person actually has in order to be able to do that? Does it violate CISSP or CEH certifications or anything like that? And also, is the company condoning that? That's another thing in there that we're looking at. So digital revenge, I would probably say that it's defensively in that sense to keep it in your company and find out what's going on. Maybe so, but offensively, probably not.
Yeah, so let's drill into hacking back just a little bit. So it's been my experience, and when I've seen some of these situations in the past, suppose you're working in a security operations center. You detect an intruder has entered your network. Somehow they've hacked into the system. They're wandering around looking at directories and file servers and things like that. Now, the instant reaction is to just block that IP address at a firewall or something like that. And that's sometimes just a temporary measure, because that attacker can then come in from another IP address and continue his escapade. So what some companies are tempted to do is turn around and direct an attack at the attacker, which means they've got a whole data center of servers there. They could direct a DDoS attack at that attacker and shut him down that way. They could even use some of the same hacker tools and try to hack into the machine owned by the attacker to see what he stole. So that's kind of the question. Do you turn around and return fire in one of these situations when it's pretty obvious somebody's coming at you? The concern is that you may not be attacking the right IP address, because he may have spoofed that IP address, or maybe doing a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that, and so you might be causing more harm than good. But that temptation is always there to reach back.
I would agree with that. Going back and doing an offensive hack, to try to do some digital revenge could be a problem, especially if the hacker is using Tor or something like that in order to hide his IP address. I know I certainly wouldn't be using my IP address in order to launch an attack from my home. So that's kind of a giveaway there. So in that case, when you actually launch your attack back at them, who are you actually attacking at that point? You may not at any point even hit the attacker unless you're able to trace that all the way back to the origin. And how difficult could that possibly be?
Okay, so what could be some of the legal issues then from this vigilante approach, you could say?
Well, if an organization, especially a for-profit organization, chooses to hack back, they may or may not be attacking the right website, but more importantly, they are in clear violation of the law. It is illegal to attack a system whether you think you're a good guy or not. The law does not draw a distinction based on your internal thought processes or your incentives. It simply wants you to not hack people. And so when you turn around and hack an attacker, you are committing the same crime that he is, and you're subject to the same prosecution, and it's easier to catch you. So you have to understand that you're setting yourself up to be in trouble there.
Yeah, it could be a legal nightmare in that sense, especially if you end up violating somebody else's system that you thought was the hacker, when in turn it actually isn't the hacker, because of the IP addresses and those things actually being masked.
So if there are legal issues and you do risk hacking back on the wrong person, do organizations do it?
I think it has been done in the past, and I think it happens kind of on the fringes, in the shadow areas. I think some security operations center employees on occasion will do it in order to shut down an attacker, and they don't necessarily tell their boss. And I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I think the company should have a clear stated policy on what this is supposed to be, and some companies simply don't have a policy on hacking back, and so some employees do it thinking they're doing the right thing.
And I would probably agree with that statement, Dave, in the sense that it's probably happening in some areas. Should it be happening? No, I would agree that in that sense, having a clear policy and giving the SOC personnel those clear directives on what it is that they're allowed to do and not allowed defensively and offensively is something that definitely needs to be addressed with either a policy, a procedure, or a standard of some kind.
Okay, thank you. So if organizations may feel then that taking matters into their own hands is their only recourse, are legislative changes on the way to allow them to do that?
I believe there are. So the problem is that when an organization is hacked and they notify the FBI, which is the typical route, pretty much they're guaranteed nothing is going to happen, because the FBI doesn't have the manpower or the resources to go back and pursue every hack that ever occurred. In fact, the FBI has a floor unless they can show clearly a loss of more than $10,000 or something. The FBI won't even open the case. They do track those so that they can put patterns together, and sometimes they can go after somebody who's done multiple attacks on different companies. But the problem is legislation is always 10 or 15 years behind the technology industry. It's always that way, and it's always going to be that way. There is currently legislation in the U.S. Congress to do something about hackback. It's called the Active Cyber Defense Certainty Act, and it went into committee earlier this year and just recently came out of committee and may be headed to the floor for a vote. And this allows in certain situations, a company can get a court order and get permission to hack the attacker in order to find out what files were stolen, and if they can find them on the attacker's machine, they can delete them or destroy them. So what it's intended to do is protect intellectual property from being stolen. The hurdles necessary that have to be met in order to act under this act are pretty steep. I'm not sure how often people will actually use it, but it does show that Congress is trying to listen to what the situation is and trying to respond to it. I'm not sure about other countries around the world, but I think there are some other discussions for sure.
And I would agree with that. And we have to kind of wait and see in that sense to see if the active Cyber Defense Act actually grabs any legs and starts running in that sense. But remember how long it took for the Federal Information Security Management Act and those things to actually take place as well, and put that into works.
Okay, thank you. I had one question come in. What about the defensive attack? Shut down the internally compromised device as a defensive attack on their intrusion, but monitor further attempts by the hacker rather than the retaliatory attack.
So that's perfectly legitimate. I mean, if an attacker is in your system, not only can you shut them down and block them, but it's perfectly legitimate to even have honeypots and things like that to try to attract attackers so that you can detect when they've entered the system. So that's okay. Enticement is fine as long as everything happens within your network. You don't put anything out on the internet. The problem occurs ethically whenever you turn around and send traffic intentionally back to the attacker to cause harm to the attacker, and that's when you cross the line.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And now the other thing is, basically shutting them down in that sense, maybe instead of shutting down the system, is isolating that system so you can actually see where that hacker is going and what he's trying to do in your system, so that you could then identify any other vulnerability or vulnerable areas that you have that you could then turn around and shore up later on. So that you kind of have to look at it in the sense, well, what's the goal there? Definitely isolate the system, and not so much maybe disconnecting it and shutting it down in that sense once he's in there, but isolate that system so you can see what's going on. The same premise as having a honeypot or something like that set up, so that once they go in there, you can kind of see the way that they're organized and attacking your system and learn from that as well.
Okay, thank you. I hope, Joe, I hope that answered your question. That was a great one. Thank you for forwarding that along. So in conclusion then, from what I understand, yes, organizations may, we can underline may, be able to hack back in the future, but under very restrictive engagement scenarios. So thank you for that. One other question that came in, a bit more of a general one. In addition to the courses that Global Knowledge offers, are there any other websites or books that can teach ethical hacking? Any suggestions that pop to mind?
There's quite a few. I mean, just as the black hat hackers can learn on the internet, so can the white hat hackers. So there's a lot of books on Amazon. I've read several of them that are pretty good. There are some small video courses you can take here and there. If you look at the Kali Linux website, and there's some references there to a lot of information on hacking tools and things like that, and those will then link you to other videos as well. So there's a lot of information. You just have to Google it and start playing.
Okay, thank you.
And I would agree with that. And the EC Council is also another area that you can look at for references as well on literature that has information on ethical hacking.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that wraps up our 5 questions, and we have a couple minutes left if anybody has any additional questions that they would like to ask. One that came in that I can address, somebody asked about where can you learn more about the prerequisites, what's required to get cybersecurity certified. Well, again, globalknowledge.com is a great resource for that. Under certification training, you can select cybersecurity, and it lists out the multiple different certifications that are out there, indicates what are the prerequisites, how many years experience do you need, the exam that's needed, and also the preparatory courses to help you for that. So I'll leave that with you. And if there are any other questions, now's your time to do so. Joe, in response to that question on hacking back, he said that ethical hacking says if it isn't yours, don't be touching their toys. So I guess that's a good rule of thumb right there. Thanks for that, Joe. So in conclusion, then, what's the next step that can be taken? So Global Knowledge, we have a wealth of courses on cybersecurity, really split out into 2 different tracks. There are the courses that will help you get certified. So if you're looking for a CISSP from ISC Squared, or maybe a certified ethical hacking certification from EC Council, Security Plus from CompTIA, we have the courses that will get you ready to successfully challenge those exams. Maybe you're looking for more hands-on experience on a particular product, say Cisco, IBM, F5, Dell. So we have courses that are unique and specific to those products as well. And Dave, as a global portfolio director, I don't know, do you have anything else to add on what's new and up and coming with Global Knowledge's cybersecurity curriculum?
Yeah, we're developing some learning paths now, so developing your own personal path to get from entry level into networking and computers all the way up into cyber certification. And those now are starting to appear in our systems. And we do offer courses both on product, as you say, and the certification courses. And there's some other courses that are just for general cybersecurity knowledge that a lot of people enjoy taking. More importantly, we offer classrooms. We offer virtual class, so you can sit at home and attend a live class. Or we have some new digital offerings, so you can do self-paced learning. So the point is, we want to educate the world on cybersecurity, and this is the best place to start.
Okay, thank you very much. And so to keep up to date on that, go to globalknowledge.com. To see our offerings, you can go to the course catalog and select cybersecurity as a topic, and you'll see them all outlined there. And in addition, it's not just about the courses. We have a wealth of resources that are there for you to keep up to date. If you're not at this point able to take a course, you can check out live webinars such as this one, recorded webinars that we've had in the past. There's white papers, case studies, all kinds of resources that you can access to keep the learning going until you're able or you get that approval to take a course with us, and we'd certainly like to have you with us on that. So again, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and a special thank you to Dave and Ross for giving up an hour of your valuable time to address these 5 taboo questions. I think we all learned a lot, and we're looking forward to exploring that even a little bit further. And we hope to see you again in an upcoming webinar or another course. Thank you very much.